Okay, so this is the first of several assignments, right, that together are building an application, right? They're building a course management, an online course management application, right? And this one is going to be very verbose, right? They're going to handhold you all the way through, right? They're going to give you lots and lots of snippets, right, of code as a guide on what to do. But as we progress throughout the semester, they're going to become less and less verbose, right? Less hand-holding and leaving a lot of decisions up to you, right? Based on what we covered in class, right? So this first assignment is extremely verbose, right? It has way too much hand-holding, I would say, and it splits up the features that we're going to be working on in 4 main features, right? One will be building a user admin application that will allow a system administrator to manage users, right? So that they'll be able to create a user, remove a user, maybe change a password, change certain profile information about a user, okay? Then they'll have another 3 pieces that are the registration, login, and profile, where users will be able to register, right? And ideally, they'll be able to register themselves as a faculty or as a student, a little bit like Piazza, right? In Piazza, anybody can really create a course, right? Anybody can claim to be a faculty. And obviously there'll be some vetting on verifying that that indeed is true, that you are indeed of the faculty who's actually teaching this. That's the boring part. So we're not going to focus on if you say you're a faculty, you're a faculty. Presumably there will be a system administrator portion where the system administrator verifies that indeed you are a faculty, right? And that's actually going to be one of the use cases of the system administrator, right? They are able to change the role of the user, right, either as a faculty or student. But if you say you're a faculty, that the system won't challenge you, right, and say, no, that's not true. By default, everybody's a student, right? If you don't say what you are, by default, you're a student. So we'll work on a registration page that will allow anybody to register, faculty and students. Okay? Then we'll work on a login page that will allow folks to log in with a username and password. Both of them, once they've registered, once they've logged in, they'll be kicked into a profile page, right, where they can see some of their profile information. Maybe they can complete their profile, provide their first name, last name, address, emails, everything that is common to most users. This will also allow us to talk about session management. Right, being able to remember things. If you say that you logged in, the system needs to remember that you logged in, right? Also, so that it can maintain a session, maintain identity for the duration of the session, right? As you are interacting and navigating from here and there, the system still knows that it's still you, right? That's not going to challenge you to a login every time you try to visit a page, right? So we'll talk about session management as well. So these are the 4 features we're going to be covering. Every assignment will have a first part. We'll say what is it, what are the features that are going to be working on that particular assignment, right? And the pointage for each one. Okay? We're going to be working in the lectures a lot on getting you started implementing login and registration and profile, a little bit of the user admin. That's why they have less pointage, because most of it's going to be done here in class. Well, not most of it, a lot of it will be done here in class, right? You're just going to have to try and get it running and working on your servers, right? On your applications, right? So that'd be the big challenge on your side. Because, well, he made it look so easy in class, right? And then you'll try to have to get it running and up and running on your machine, right? And debug it and whatnot. On the user admin, we'll work on a little bit on it, but not entirely. So that has a little more weightage. So the learning objectives, obviously we'll introduce HTML. I'm assuming that most of you already know what HTML is, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, on the explaining what it is and whatnot. We'll cover the very basics here, and as we go throughout the semester, we'll introduce and talk about more. So we'll learn it as we use it. Okay. Also, we'll introduce some CSS, the cascading style sheets to change the look and feel of. Again, I'm going to assume you know a little bit of it, and we'll learn it as we go. Right. In particular, we're going to be using a library, the Bootstrap CSS library, which is a very popular library. If you want to use another one, then go ahead. But the assignment will assume that it has to at least look an equivalent look and feel. Right? You are free to make it look different colors, different layouts. If you feel that you have a better layout, go ahead. All right. So feel free to change the look and feel. Right? The wireframes that we're going to be looking at here are only suggestions, right, on the features that should be there, right? But you're free to change the look and feel. We'll also talk about JavaScript as the programming language of the web. Also, we'll talk about manipulating the document object model, dynamically telling the browsers to show and hide or add or remove content on the browser. Also, exposing data through a RESTful API through web services. We'll create the middle tier as a Java middle tier using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is a framework that allows you to create web applications or web servers very easily, right? Just with a couple lines of code and you're done. You have a web server running on Java. Also, how to represent data and using the JavaScript object notation. Talk to a database. We'll set up MySQL as a database. But we're not going to be using SQL at all, right? We're not going to do selects or inserts or deletes. Instead, we'll use a JPA, Java Persistence API, that will allow us to talk to a database as if it were objects, right? List of objects, arrays of objects. And we'll leave JPA to handle all the translation into SQL. And finally, UML to model our data model, right? So here's the data model that we're going to be focusing this first week, right? We're going to have a base class that represents a person. And then we're going to create two derived classes from that, faculty and students, that are going to be taking all the common features of persons, so first name, last name, social security number, whatever. All those are common. Everybody pays taxes. And then faculty and student will have things that are specific to them. And faculties are going to be authoring in multiple courses. So here we have a one-to-many relationship between a faculty and a course. Students can enroll in a section, right? And they can have maybe a grade on that particular section. So they enrolled in this particular section and they got this particular grade, right? So the enrollment is an association class. And notice there's a many-to-many mapping here. So a student can be enrolled in many sections. A section can have many students enrolled in that section. But each enrollment is more described by the enrollment class there. Faculty can teach many sections, and a course can have many sections. Right? As we progress through the semester, we'll add more here. Right? A course will have all sorts of other content. Right? So a course can have many modules. Each module can have many lessons. Each lesson can have many topics. Each topic can have videos and all sorts of content, right? Quizzes, assignments, very much. So we're building, instead of building Blackboard, we'll be building Whiteboard. Okay, we'll call our project, we'll call it Whiteboard, right? Throughout the semester. All right, so that's the class diagram. All right, so the front end we'll be building it using jQuery to manipulate the DOM. You'll be asked to first create a middle tier database. The user admin will be 40 points, and it'll be split evenly split on 20 points for the front end and 20 points for the back end. All right. So for 20 points, you're asked to implement the following wireframe. Right. So the user admin logs in as an admin, and they can see all the users that are in the system. Right. And they can add a new one. Right, so notice they have a form. They can type username, password, first name, last name, and they create a plus, and that adds it to the list. They can click on the edit on any one of them, and then it copies it into the form, and so they can change aspects of that form, and then do an OK, and then it updates the record. They can remove a user by clicking on X, and then removes that particular user. So this is a system administrator should be able to do this. Right? The same requirements that you see here in the assignment, the same requirements apply in the final project. Okay, so for the final project, you'll also be asked as a requirement that there has to be a user admin, some system administrator aspect to this, right? So this will be one of the requirements. Okay, and you're welcome to use the same things that you worked on for the assignment to reuse that in your project. Okay? Right. So in essence, you are working towards your project. So that's the front end. For the back end, okay. Also, we again this first assignment is very verbose. It even asks you to name your files in a particular naming convention. All right. So it asks you that the HTML should have this specific name. The CSS has to have this specific name. The JavaScript for that manipulates the DOM has to have that name, and also the model and the service. So it has a specific pattern, right? It'll be feature dot the role, the tier, and then the extension, right? Meaning the feature here is that we're creating a user admin. The role is that this is a template. It's an HTML template, right? And that this is running on the client, on the browser. Right? So this is being executed by the browser. So here the role is a style class. Right? This is a controller handling user input. Here you have a model, so it's modeling, right? Capturing some data about a user. Service, meaning it's talking through a network to somebody, right? It's exposing some data structures. So here's some examples of using that. So it asks you that each one of these has a pointage. So for the HTML portion, it has 5 points. And it gives you snippets of code to work on this. 1 point for styling, 1 point for the user model, and we give you most of the code anyway, right? You just have to get it working. 5 points for the controller. We get you started on controller, right? We give you a snippet of it. We almost complete it in class, right? For the controller, we give you what the signature should be and the specifications of what. So it's very specific. This first assignment. As the assignments progress, they become less and less specific. Okay. But it doesn't mean that you stop applying the same naming conventions or the same best practices, right? About some of the conventions that we use here. So these are based on best practices in the industry, but it's also specific to certain teams that I've worked on real projects. If you've been on a co-op or are currently in a co-op, or if you have experience doing some of this, and you have an alternative naming convention, right, or an alternative framework that you want to, how do you want to structure this, and you think it's better, or please, you go ahead. You just maybe ask if you to make sure. But again, if you have a best practice that you want to practice on, that you've used on your co-op, please feel free to explore that. For the back end, It's 20 points for the back end. So there'll be a user model on the server side. There'll be a user service on the server side. There'll be a database user repository that allows you to talk to a database. And there'll be a user SQL that initializes the database. For the data model, for the user admin data model for the user, here's the class diagram. Here's an example of what that user model will look like. There'll be an entity, a database entity. This will map it to a user table, right, with the fields, username, password, first name, last name, so on and so forth. Right? It'll create a repository. So it walks you through all this. Create the schema. So verify that indeed this is the schema that was created in the database. Also expose that data, right, to create, remove, update, delete a user. We'll implement that as well. And what else? So you'll create a RESTful controller. So we'll do that. So yeah, so that's the user admin. So that's 40 points for the sign up for the registering. That's 20 points. Half of it will be the front end, and half of it will be the server. Right, so for 10 points, you'll do the template, the CSS, the client, the service, following this wireframe. The wireframe has it's responsive, so that it looks good on a desktop. Right, if you have if you're looking at a landscape or you're looking at it in portrait mode, it looks good in both cases. Notice that the form. Notice how it flips, right? You see, on landscape, you have the labels and on left-hand side, and you have the input fields on the right-hand side, right? But when you flip it, it goes from horizontal, it goes to vertical, right? Where the labels are on top of the fields on every account. Yes? So that's what we mean by responsive, and we'll see how to do that. And using Bootstrap, it's trivial, right? It's very, very easy, right? So yeah, so that's the front end. Again, same naming convention. There'll be the feature that we're creating a registration page. This is the HTML template. This is running on the client, on the browser, and the extension. Following naming conventions and file structure is helpful, especially if you're working on a team, right? And you're bringing folks on board. People are coming and going. It makes it easier for everybody to understand how the project is structured, right? And just by looking at the file, you immediately see, you kind of place yourself mentally, what are you looking at, right? And then map it to the running application, right? So it helps folks to understand how is this organized. So that's the client side, and then on the server side. The server side, you have a user service. You'll implement you'll modify the repository. You'll modify the user service a little bit to support the sign up, right? Creating new users, and finally logging in. Again, there'll be a template part. Here the wireframes, sign in, logging in. Each point for those, and we give you lots of snippets to get started. Okay. All right, so that's the first assignment. Let's, I'm sorry, yeah, profile page. Once you log in or once you register, the system will remember that you just registered, so you're kind of logged in, right? I already know who you are. Or if you're coming back and you're logging in after having registered, the profile will show you information about the user. So it'll have profile information such as phone number, email. Not shown here, but first name would be here, last name would be here. Other fields would be as well. And notice that it's responsive as well. And I can update, right, my profile information. I can log out. If I log out, it goes back to the login page or the home page. Update. Once it updates, it should show a little response or some feedback saying yes, the profile has been successfully updated. Like this, profile successfully saved, right? And notice that these are using some of the widgets. So for the date here, date of birth, It'll be a calendar. If for the role, it'll be a drop-down. What else? There'll be a message at the top. Your profile successfully saved. You've updated. So the profile has its own controller, the client, and the server side. Database requirements. Just verify that this is indeed the schema of the user table. And here are the bonus parts, right? The bonus portions of this. Like validation, maybe this should be a little more, maybe 5 points, maybe 3 points, 3 and 3. Source control requirements. All throughout, so we're going to expect you to be using a good practice on source control, right? So typically, especially if you're working in a team, ideally you would not be working on master, right, on a GitHub repository, right? Instead, you create a feature branch. You're working on on the registration page, so you create a register. Maybe you're working on the template, right, and you're making it look good and whatnot. So you're working on the feature branch might be called registration template, yes, and then you do all your work there. And then, if you're in a team, you would push this to a pull request, and somebody else in the team, right, would look at your source code, would verify, and would review, would criticize you, or say it's okay, and they would merge it, meaning they are making themselves responsible for your code, right? They're saying they're willing to debug your code if it's wrong at some point, right? So they better make a good job at reviewing your code, right, and accepting it, right? And that's how you improve quality, overall quality of the source code, right? If everybody becomes responsible for the code, right? And same thing, right? If they develop something, they would push a pull request and they would assign it to you. And same thing, right? You would review it. So are you willing to take responsibility for this source code? And if yes, then you merge it. And then maybe at the end of the day, you merge it back into master, right? What you shouldn't do is merge anything into master. You should not be working on master. You should always have some feature branch, right? And once you're happy with what you've done, merge it into master, right? At the end of the day, perhaps. Also, typically, you would be doing frequent commits, right? So once you reach a stable state of your application, maybe that's a good time to create a commit, right? And then you keep working a little more, and then you do another commit, right? And then you work a little more, and then you do another commit, right? So lots of frequent commits allows you to backtrack. If you broke it somehow, you can always backtrack to the previous stable state, yes? Okay, so if you come to the TA hours and myself, right, the first thing we're going to do is a git log, right, and look at your log of what have you been working on. Right, and if it's broken, the first thing that we're going to ask you to do, well, can you go back to where you were before it was broken, right? And see your differences. You can say, we'll do a git diff and see what have you changed. If we see 20 files, right? Well, you have not been using good practice in source control. Right? We should just see just a couple of lines that you've modified, just maybe 10, 20 lines at max, right? And then now we can focus on what's wrong with those 20 lines as opposed to trying to find it in a haystack, right? It's impossible. Well, I don't know where did you introduce, where did you break it? I don't know. You touched 20 files, right? So please, right? So yeah, there'll be some percentage of the assignment that will track how well, how well were you tracking your work on GitHub. Yeah, see, so there should be a commit for every single new file and every new function or feature added. Okay? Right, so make sure that you look for that. And all throughout, right, this should be lowercase. We're asking you to use Git to use this. Okay, Git command created user admin template. So we'll give you some examples. Do the same for every section that follows where a new file is created or new functionality is added. All right. So please, don't forget to commit your work. So all throughout we are reminding you. Yes. But in the next assignments we'll stop reminding you. So remember to get into the habit of committing your work and merging it. Right? Okay. So that's the first assignment. Any questions? Again, the focus will be to get the server up and running, this running on a remote server, okay, by the end of, I guess by next Monday. All right? Okay.